Recording. All right, we are live and we're recording. So, good Wednesday morning, everybody. We are very lucky to have with us Dawn Hart with Manage with Hart, and not even just Manage with Hart. With her maiden name combined, she is Large Heart, and I swear I mean, that's amazing, and she really does. So she has servant style leadership, and I loved it when I first met her. Perfect. So Dawn is here in Oklahoma City, and she has got a lot of letters after her name. She specializes in HR, and she's set up her own company. So Dawn, kick us off by telling us all about your qualifications and what it means, and give us a
Oh my
little
gosh,
insight into you. Yeah.
absolutely. First, a big shout out from Oklahoma City. I'm a fourth generation Oklahoman. I'm super, super proud of my state, even though it's like 9,865 degrees and we're all melting here. Um, Helen's nodding her head. Yeah. I have been in HR almost 30 years. Yes, I started when I was 5. Um, yeah, I was the boss. Like I got those report cards that said she's bossy, and I'm like, leadership right there. I actually have my SPHR, which stands for Senior Professional Human Resources Certification, which is actually through HRCI, which is a kind of an organization that is for HR professionals. And then if that wasn't enough, I went back and got my SHRM-SCP, which is your Senior Certified Professional, which is through our trade organization, SHRM. And then because I was really bored, I decided to go back to school in my 50s, and I just recently graduated with a master's degree from the University of Oklahoma in organizational leadership. So that's what all those letters are. I know. My daughter's like, "You look like a doctor." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a doctor of HR." I am not getting my PhD, by the way. I have been asked that. I'm like, absolutely not.
No, but I love it. Because HR is such it kind of reminds me of, one of those paint charts. You've got all the different shades, and
Yeah.
so you get people go, I do HR, and you're like, really? Which is where I was when I started, because the company I was at, well, actually they fired the person doing HR, and they kind of plopped this stuff down on my desk and go, hey, you need to run payroll for Friday. And I'm like,
And it's like Tuesday. Yeah.
yeah, I was like, I've never run payroll and I don't know what I'm doing. So I was that person on the first rung of the paint chart. But so which is it got the job done. People got paid, but I mean, I wouldn't call me an expert. But you've got and you've taken it all the way up the paint chart, and you've got all these, colors and variations that you can bring to it, which I think is HR, because it's just dealing
Yeah.
with people. And there really should be more books written by HR professionals about the
Yeah.
stuff that happens at work and the questions you get asked and the situations that come up that you have to deal with that are just so weird. You couldn't make it up if you tried. So there's a
You
thought.
know,
It's
it's
for getting a PhD, you need to write a book. It's going to be a bestseller.
okay. So it's funny that you say that. I actually have started a book,
Ah,
and it's called the Field Guide for Managers on how to stay out of HR. And it's like kind of chock full of that kind of stuff. Like, don't go ask your HR manager if you can, make comments about a girl in your office is too short of skirt and you're a male. I mean, just kind of some of that stuff. So, working on getting some stories from fellow HR people so that I've started it. I think I'm on like chapter 2 or 3, and it's just the adventures of HR. And there's even a chapter called The Adventures of the Unemployed, which is just stuff that people, when they're applying for jobs, that they say or that they do. So just, kind of very tongue in cheek, but it's meant to be funny as well as informative. So I don't have a date. I don't have a publisher. I just started writing it because it was funny. So it's funny that you said that.
oh, okay. So the interview questions, I have interviewed a lot of people and hired a lot of people. So I have got some interesting stories. I will have to send them to you. Um,
Absolutely.
Yeah, because some of the stuff I was just like, I'm not sure what to respond to this.
That's
Very good.
hilarious. Yeah.
Very, very interesting. But I know you've got a fabulous presentation for us, so I will let you have at it. You've got the screen share thingy enabled, and then afterwards, I know I'm going to have some questions.
Okay. Well, let
Uh,
me pull up my lovely PowerPoint presentation
all
and we
right.
will get started. and hopefully I can do this. There we go. So do you see my screen? Not just me, hopefully.
No, no, got your screen right there. Looks good.
Right. So it's funny that we're talking about HR and the impact of HR because as business owners, a lot of times you don't want to be told that you need HR. I was just having a conversation with a fellow fractional HR professional today, and he said, telling business owners or telling CEOs that they need HR is like telling a drug addict that um, they're a drug addict. So it's kind of like they already know, but it's like they don't want to accept the inevitable. But a lot of times, as business owners or professionals, we kind of think, do we really need HR? What's the importance of HR? And I want to say there is some significant reasons as to why you need HR. Now, do you need a full-time person or or a part-time or a fractional? So that's really what this conversation is to dive into. Ironically, today I'm a big LinkedIn person. So if you want to link in with me, I'm always open to LinkedIn. And I was reading this article that was written by James Moore, HR Solutions, and I have a really good friend that works for James Moore. It's how to find an HR consultant for your business. And I thought the timeliness of this couldn't be any better. And so I can send you the link, but it also kind of talks about what I'm going to talk about in my presentation today. But so there's even articles out there that are telling you what, as a business owner, you need to be looking at if you're considering HR. So let's talk about why you should care or what the current business environment looks like today. If you are not aware of it, it is fast paced. And I know some of you all are changing or shaking your head. It's ever changing and it is constant. So, as a growing business, you want to keep in mind that it could be an opportunity to hire some SMEs, subject matter experts, particularly if you're in a startup or you have some unique HR challenges. And I kind of laugh because technology always comes to mind when I think of unique HR challenges. It's those techies. Or people that are like, I have this great idea. I want to do an app, and then this app grows. I worked for a company several years ago that was just started out as a little tiny app, and they had some angel funding, and then it took off 3 or 4 years later, and it grew and was eventually sold. So, and they brought in HR as a fractional thing. Now, obviously, you have the traditional HR model, which people tend to think of when they think of HR, and that's your in-house, where you have someone on staff that's managing it all. And like Helen's story when she was talking about, here, go do payroll, I totally can relate to that. I actually got into HR through training, and I was a trainer, and they said, hey, we want you to be our HR manager. And I'm like, what does that even mean? And at the time it was called personnel. So that's how far back I go in my HR journey. But there's this really cool thing that is coming out nowadays that more and more people are taking a look at, especially those small to mid-size businesses. And that is the emergence of fractional HR. And so fractional HR is a flexible part-time service. It provides businesses with expertise that you might not need with a full-time commitment. So you might not need to bring somebody in full-time, or maybe you have projects that need to be done. Maybe you need a handbook that's reviewed. Maybe you need a job description. Maybe you need a compensation survey. There's all kinds of reasons that you can actually utilize this. So as a CEO or as a business owner, why should you care? Well, because HR fractional can actually help your business stay compliant. That's the last thing you want to do is end up in court because you mismanage a situation. It can also help you manage your talent and really help build your culture. So that's why it's important as a CEO that you really need to set up and kind of take notice of this, because there's this thing called humans that work for you, and they are not all black, white, orange, purple with pink polka dots. They come in many shapes and many sizes. So making sure that you care about what your business is going to be like, and your HR business partner as a fractional person can help you with that. So I want to kind of dive into the integral role of HR as it pertains into organizations themselves, because as Helen kind of talked about, it's this global situation where HR touches just about every aspect of a business. They recruit your team, they retain your team, they might assist in payroll. In my case, I'm terrible at payroll, so I'm not even going to own the payroll. They might help you determine benefit costs. And believe it or not, they have a finger on every kind of line of business that's in your organization. So you want to make sure as you're looking at kind of how to encompass HR You want to ensure that you are creating a strong foundation for that business growth. So, the integral role of HR and the key areas where they drive success, just to drive a little bit further into some specific areas that you're thinking about as a CEO or as a business owner or someone that is interested in hiring a fractional HR person, they are responsible for your talent acquisition and your retention. So, they help get those people in the door and they help keep them in the door. And no, they don't lock the back door so people can't escape. They help create an environment where people want to stay. I had a manager ask me once, well, can I just duct tape that person to the chair? And I know they were kidding, but it also made me like think, well, why do they want to leave? You shouldn't have to duct tape them to the chair, even though you might want to. So how do we retain those people? Then there's employee engagement and productivity. So that's the link between employees being engaged and that higher lines of productivity. If you have engaged employees, you're going to have high producing employees. HR actually helps shape your cultural and your organizational development as well. So, very much how you promote your mission, how you promote your vision, and the impact that a culture has on your organization is huge and will help determine the long term strategies for your employees' engagement within an organization. And then, of course, there's that legal compliance and risk management that's associated with it. There are multiple HR laws that actually govern every hiring decision that comes into play as a CEO or as a business owner that you may or may not know about. And sometimes it's as little as less than 5 employees that you have to comply with. Sometimes it gets on up into 50, 75, 100. But you, as a business owner, can't use the excuse, I didn't know. And so it's important that you understand that there is some compliance and some risk management that you do need to understand as a business owner or as a CEO of your company. So, why is it important? Because companies with strong HR practices, and you'll notice HR practices, so it doesn't necessarily mean an HR professional in the role, are 1.4 times more likely to achieve above average profitability. That's huge. Having engaged employees increases your profit. Organizations with an employee engagement with strong employee engagement outperform their peers by 21% in profitability. So now I'm talking numbers. I'm talking to the heart of why it should matter and why you need to sit up and pay attention to this. And the businesses with well-defined cultures and strong HR support, whether it's on a fractional level or it's on a full-time HR professional, see a 30% reduction in employee turnover. Pause here for a second because I'm not sure how many people know how much employee turnover costs an organization. So, a quick side note here, it is anywhere between 3 to 5 times an employee's average salary to get them hired and trained and performing at the level that you need them to be, generally within a 6-month ramp up period. So, reducing turnover is really going to impact your bottom line because you're not having to constantly hire employees over and over and over again. And I say that because I have a recruiting background, and anytime we're having to backfill positions, it's just, oh my gosh, why? How come we didn't get that person to stay as long as we wanted them to stay? So let's talk about and switch gears and understanding what the fractional piece of HR comes into play. And this is a flexible solution for any growing business. So the sweet spot for fractional HR could be anywhere from less than 50 employees all the way up to, thousands of employees. It really is just based on the type of project or the type of situation that your business calls for. So as we look at defining what it is, so it's outsourcing HR functions to an external. So these are, you're looking at the HR functions, maybe it's somewhere along the lines of having to do a compensation analysis. I just did a compensation analysis for a company that was really needing to get an understanding where their comp was, and their compensation was all over the place. I mean, they had employees that were making, you know, significantly less, employees that had been there a long time that were making significantly less than the employees that had been there recently had just been hired. So just really having to do a restructure and understanding compensation was a small, I don't want to say a small project, it actually is a rather large project. It's flexible, it's part-time. So you don't have to worry about the head count. This is something that someone can come in on a project or hourly based situation, and then it's on demand. So you're actually, as a CEO or as a business owner, creating the on-demand need for this role. And what's great about fractional HR is you can scale services up or you can scale them down based on business requirements. So I specialize in management training and development, particularly new managers, those employees that get promoted to manager and don't always get the training that they need. And then they end up in the HR office. So that's another reason I'm writing the book. So it's like I work with organizations that maybe have a group of individuals that they either want to promote or have been recently promoted, and I come in on an on-demand basis. So I work with groups that have maybe six new managers. I come in, I spend 6 months not only training them, developing them, but coaching and consulting with them so that they develop the skills that they need to be successful managers. And so that's on a 6 month process. And then that company will hire me back a little bit further down the road once they have another set of managers that need to go through training. Again, it's a scale up or a scale down opportunity for business owners and CEOs to utilize fractional HR. So let's look at them side by side because I know I quickly went through different components of this. So I want to talk about the traditional versus the fractional piece of it. So as a business owner, maybe you have, it's always good if you're looking at bringing on a full-time HR person once you hit that 100 employee mark. That's generally what I see. Sometimes between 50 to 100, they start needing to have someone to come in and run their entire HR department. I've built 5 HR departments from the very beginning, from the very ground up, working with companies that had 20 employees all the way up to companies that had 300 and really building that HR department so that it could be handed off to a future HR professional that can do it full time. So on the traditional side, you're looking at someone that was responsible for all your HR activities. So that's your traditional, that's your recruiting, payroll, benefits, employee relations, compliance. I know what it's like to be an HR department of one and have 200 employees and you're like scrambling for all kinds of stuff, but that's inevitably what happens with a full-time person. They're responsible for everything. And the challenges is maintaining that in-house HR, particularly if someone that gets overloaded or burned out, or maybe just doesn't have the skill set to juggle a lot of different things in an HR department where they're managing everything. There are higher associated costs with having an in-house person that you need to be aware of. And obviously that's benefits, that is the pay that you're paying somebody, that could be training that you're incorporating, it could be workers' comp. There's all kinds of components that come with a traditional in-house, fully staffed HR person. Then, of course, I just talked about that potential skill gap. Where my management services get utilized a lot of times is when I have an HR professional that might say, hey, I don't have that skill set or I don't have the bandwidth. And that's when I get called in to help with that. Same situation if I have an HR manager that's relatively new to HR and they need me to mentor this HR professional. So there's all kinds of ways out there that you can even bring in a fractional person if you're looking at bringing in traditional so that they can help scale up a traditional HR person. Companies with 75 or less generally don't have the resources to staff that and resources, budget, time, wherewithal, all the stuff that comes with it. And that's where your fractional piece comes into play, is it's flexibility to scale, like I just talked about. So how do you scale that up? It's avoiding those fixed costs because you already know, hey, I'm going to pay this fractional HR professional for a fixed one-time cost versus having to look at workers' comp or benefits. What's great about fractional HR people is they have a wide range of specialized HR skills and knowledge. So maybe you just need someone to come in and set your recruiting strategy. Maybe you need someone to do succession planning for your team of managers. Maybe you need someone to come in and coach your team managers. There's all kinds of really cool things out there that fractional HR can come into play. And of course, there's that cost efficiency that goes with it because there's lower overall costs by paying just the services that you need as opposed to having kind of the catch-all be-all for your traditional HR department. So who benefits from fractional HR? That's a good question. And I do get asked that so, lots of times, who really can benefit and understand what comes from hiring someone to do your fractional HR responsibilities? Well, at your startups and growing companies, because those are your companies that need to establish those HR functions quickly without the overhead of a full-time team. You need to get employee handbook in place. Maybe you need to do some benefit negotiation. Maybe you need to put a standard operating procedure together. Maybe you need some job descriptions. And that's really where a fractional person kind of shines when it's what we call a generalist. So they bring that skill set. And you need expert guidance when you're setting up an HR department, particularly on that compliance side. You want to make sure you're complying with those HR laws out there that you need to be aware of, that you can't say, I didn't know. And I say this, you can Google it, but Google, you're wasting your own time and you're spinning a lot of wheels, because it's always nice to know what needs to be done and how it needs to be done when you hire someone to do that. Small to medium-sized enterprises obviously can benefit because they're also scaling up. They might have one HR person and they need somebody that can support that one HR person in some projects. Companies that need temporary HR support. I had a team reach out to me. They had somebody, their HR person was actually going out on maternity leave, and they were in the middle of a huge HRIS, Human Resources Information System transformation. Like they were in the middle of kind of moving all their stuff from one system to another. And this person that came on board needed to understand how to do that. And so they hired someone for this 90-day contract to not only help the employee that was going out on maternity leave, but really help the department make the jump from when they convert their system to the new system. So it was a very specific lined kind of benefit. It was, I need someone that's been there that can do that, so that when I go out on maternity leave, I literally can hand you the data and you can help with that transition. So huge success. And then that fractional HR person continues to work with that group today, just because they did such a great job kind of setting up their HRIS system. So something to think about when you're looking at technology or navigating complex employee relations issues. Maybe you need somebody, a third party, to come in and do an investigation. I hear a lot of that, and I've been known to get called to come do investigations, harassment, bullying, sexual harassment, discrimination, that kind of stuff. So that's another way that you can outsource your fractional HR if you are a small to medium-sized company. So let's shift over to those large corporations during transitional periods. Maybe you have a company that is going through some change and you need some change management training. You had a company that was acquired another company, and you're trying to mesh that culture. So it's always nice to have an outsourced HR professional, fractional person that can come in and really assist with change management, because it's rough. It's rough when it's like this company bought this company and now they want these two to mesh, and this company hates this company because it bought this company. There's all kinds of horror stories that I've heard with companies that have merged or gone through an acquisition and they've had to juggle that culture change. So how do you create a new culture for both those merging organizations? Restructuring could be going on. There could be new divisions. You could be entering new markets. So it's nice to have an outside fractional HR person come in and kind of give you a different viewpoint from things you may or may not be thinking about. And then, of course, those companies needing specialized focused HR projects. So if you need some management training, or if you need some one-on-one coaching, maybe you have a manager that is really struggling to have conversations with their team. Coaching, an HR fractional person can come in and do some employee relations coaching pretty quickly and help get that situation either rectified or help you come to decisions that you need to make. So there is a growing trend for fractional HR. And like I said, when I started this presentation, there's even articles out on LinkedIn that talk about how to find that fractional HR component and if you really need it. So what I'm seeing out in the marketplace, and kind of one of the reasons I really started my own company, was because I'm starting to see those shifts in business practice, because landscape in the business world is creating these situations that we need to be flexible. We need cost-effective solutions, particularly in HR. I've been told this ever since I got in the HR market, that I'm a cost center. cost the company money. I don't make the company money. And it's nice to be able to say, hey, here's the deal. While I may be costing you money, I am saving you money, by the way, when I'm helping with engagement or I'm helping with turnover. So there is a constant need for businesses to really look at being agile in not just business operations, but response to global challenges. We live in a very big global world. And if COVID taught us one thing, it's definitely that we can be global in a matter of seconds. There's also that economic uncertainties and rapid technological advancements. Just think about how AI has changed and grown through the years to the point that we didn't even know what AI was. Like us non-techie people didn't even know what AI was until now it's in our face and everywhere we turn around. Believe it or not, AI has been around for a long time. We just didn't really put a name to it. But now it's continuing to be a focus, and there's a huge advancement in technology that we need to be aware of. There is a significant growth in the adoption of fractional HR, particularly among small to medium-sized enterprises and those startups, really needing those SMEs, those subject matter experts. There's the demand for cost efficiency. So we're under increasing pressure as businesses to manage costs while continuing to maintain high levels of expertise and service. Fractional HR helps offer a way to access that top tier HR talent without having to pay that full-time salary. And of course, those benefit costs that go with it. Fractional HR allows companies to only pay for those HR services. Therefore, you're saving money and you're being cost efficient. And there's that demand for specialized expertise. Maybe you have the jack of all trades or the generalist that's currently working for you, but you really need to focus on those evolving labor laws and staying on top of those, or implementing HR technologies, like my example with the pregnant HR employee that went out on leave, making sure that succession planning is happening. And the biggest one of all that I'm really, really hearing right now is DEI initiatives, so diversity, equity, and inclusion, quality and inclusion. And that is huge. And those Gen Zs that are entering the workplace right now are craving and demanding that your organizations be DEI focused, as well as almost leading the charge. It's critical to that age group. And lastly, I think one of the biggest market dynamics that I'm seeing is that flexibility and that ability to scale up and down, like I addressed earlier, because fractional HR offers that tailored approach that grows with the business. So it can grow up, it can grow down, and it helps you maintain HR support that aligns with your business objectives. So those are the market dynamics that I'm seeing as a fractional HR consultant out in the market right now. So I really think this was an interesting statistic. And as I was doing this presentation and putting it together, I was talking to a lot of counterparts out there, kind of what they're seeing and the growth that they're experiencing. So over 60% of subject matter experts have reported using or considering fractional HR services in the past 5 years. So SMEs, those are those small businesses, those are those growing companies, those are those startups, those are those companies that are really like, how can I continue to keep this momentum and gain employees and keep employees here? The HR market has seen a year-on-year growth of 25% globally. So there are more and more organizations out there that are really using this type of service. It's staggering the amount of companies across the globe that have 250 employees or less and either don't have an HR person or don't have the strategic HR initiatives in place that they need to be able to scale. 70% of businesses that have used fractional HR have seen significant efficiency and compliance improvement. Because we can come in and see, I can do an HR audit and come in and say, listen, this is what you're missing, this is what you need. And a lot of times business owners don't have the knowledge, the time, the skill set to do that. And your fractional HR people can come in and help with compliance and see where there's some efficiencies or lack of efficiencies that need to be improved upon. So companies report 15% reduction in HR related costs. Of course they do, because you're saving on turnover, you're saving on those fixed costs that I talked about. It's really looking at what are my HR related costs as a business owner I need to be aware of. And then, of course, business with fractional HR support are 50% more likely to reduce legal risks. If I haven't scared you enough about legal, I don't mean to scare you, but I would be remiss if I didn't point it out. That's where I see a lot of calls from my companies that are, hey, I need an HR audit, or can you come in and really talk to my management team about the legal risks that they could be assuming when they step into management roles. I've seen businesses get sued for not following COBRA laws. I've seen businesses get into hot water when they have kept a manager on board that has had some huge harassment issues. And this is all stuff that costs you money in the end. And if you stick your head in the sand, you're not going to be able to last very long. It's going to take one really large case as a business owner to be sued. When there's a situation that it could have been very simple to bring in a fractional HR to help you determine where your legal risks are. So I want to talk to you about a company that I worked with. It's called TechRite, and they were a small company. They had 67 employees. They reached out to me directly because they needed some assistance kind of standing up their HR department. And when I went in to take this, and that's why I joked about the technology people, this company was founded by two techie nerds, and they call themselves techie nerds, and they were struggling with keeping top talent, and they were really struggling kind of where their issues were, where their risks were. So they had really, really high turnover. They had some huge compliant risks. They didn't have an employee handbook in place. They didn't have accurate job descriptions. Their compensation was all over the place. They didn't know who they were recruiting. They didn't know how they were recruiting. They didn't know how people were getting in the door. So there was really no onboarding that was taking place. Employees were missing out on getting signed up for benefits. Just a lot of craziness that you would anticipate in a techie startup, which doesn't surprise me. I've worked in the tech industry several times, as well as the finance industry. Sorry, another thing about Oklahoma is we have these terrible allergies. Helen's probably shaking her head right now. So if I keep letting my nose, it's because my allergies are getting the worst of me. So this company really couldn't figure out why they had low employee engagement and what the situation is. So I was brought in. First, I was brought in to do an HR audit. They said, we don't have an HR department. We know we're missing the boat. We just got in trouble because we didn't follow all the rules that we needed to follow when it came to offboarding an employee. We really feel like we're under the gun. We're losing employees because we seem so scattered, and our culture is terrible because we don't know what we're doing when it comes to this employee stuff. No knock on techie nerds. They don't. They do. They designed a great technological product. They weren't in the business to manage the people. And that's where I was brought in. So I came in and I did a huge HR audit, really focused on talent acquisition and onboarding. That's where we were seeing some huge gaps. Compliance and policy development. Like I said, they didn't even have an employee handbook, so the employees didn't know, who to talk to if they were facing employee issues. They didn't know anything about their pay schedules. It was just a little bit crazy, not even gonna lie. And then employee engagement and retention. So those were the three areas that they really wanted me to spend time focusing on getting employees engaged. So I started out doing this HR summer or HR audit, which moved into a recognition program, which moved into creating employee surveys, because I thought employee surveys were critical. We wanted to find out, A, why the employees were attracted to the organization, and B, why they stayed or why they were leaving. So we created some focus groups and really talked about morale and how they thought the company could improve. So it's really taking time to listen to those employees so that they feel like they're heard. Now, could we have implemented everything that they suggested? No, that's impossible, especially as a growing tech company that was relying on angel funding or was relying on grants. However, employees just wanted to be heard. And I think this was the first time in the company's history. I know it was the first time in the company's history that we sat the employees down and really listened to them. Now, can you do an employee survey on your own as an employer? Of course you can. Now, it gets a little, people get a little worried that their answers are not going to be confidential. There's always going to be that piece to it. So what's great about bringing in a fractional HR person to help do these employee engagement surveys is they're a third party. So the only skin in the game that they have is to deliver the results back to the owner or the CEO, and then help them create a strategic plan to maybe implement some of those suggestions. So let's talk about the success, the results of what happened. This is one of those projects that probably took about 6 months to get everything off the ground and really running, but we wanted to make sure that we were doing it right. And we reduced turnover from 25% to 12% within the first year. Staggering. It was crazy. And we reduced that. I think one of those things was really getting engaged in what the employees had to say. We successfully achieved an internal labor audit with no penalties. So remember, I told you that this company was having some issues with the Department of Labor. The Department of Labor had come in and they had done this crazy labor audit, and they were scared because they were worried they were going to have penalties. So we went through it. We looked at where the situation was and worked with the Department of Labor to make sure that we got back on track and we're creating equitable pay across the board for all of the employees. So that was a really, really great thing, because those external Department of Labor audits with no penalties, that's massive savings. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars that this company could have been fined if we just ignored ignored what the Department of Labor had to say. And then we reduced our time to hire by 50%, which maintained the growth momentum. And I thought that was important, as this tech company is constantly on the cutting edge of technology, and they were looking at ways to get people in the door. They were actually sitting on these great hires and not hiring them. And then they couldn't figure out, when they picked up the phone to call and make the offer, that person had already moved on. So we wanted to reduce that time from, I think it was somewhere in the 6-week mark to get somebody hired, and we wanted to reduce it down to 2 weeks. So that was a goal that the owner wanted to put in place. And probably the biggest one that I think was very eye-opening for this team was the employee engagement scores improved by 30%, which created a more positive work culture. So we did a benchmark and we looked at that, and then we created focus groups from the employee engagement scores. We spent a lot of time kind of shifting through what we thought made the best business sense for these organizations. And then we went back 6 months later and did another employee engagement survey, and we're just blown away by the results. Not to mention the fact the turnover and how low the turnover had gone. That speaks directly back to the employee engagement and the importance of this. Now, at the end of all this, not only did we get these great things, we helped build the HR department so that they could have someone come in and actually take over the HR department that had been built from the ground up. And could an HR professional come in and done all this? Absolutely. Would it have taken a lot longer? 100%. Because as an HR professional coming in, having to clean everything up and having to deal with the day-to-day operations of an HR department, they just would not have had the bandwidth to do that. Particularly in this example, there was a lot of legwork that was done on the ground by myself as their consultant that couldn't have been done or managed by the HR person alone. And so that's just a great example of how fractional HR really helped a growing company. So the strategic advantages of embracing fractional HR for business growth, I always like to think from a strategic global point. My husband's the president of a bank here in Oklahoma. And so he's always like, so what's the advantage to this? And he has a really large HR department, but it's always funny to say, that's a great question. Why would someone benefit from this? Well, as a CEO, it allows you to focus more on your core business objectives. You notice it doesn't say HR objectives. It says business objectives. You have a business to run as a CEO, and it is impossible for you to be all things to all people. So hiring fractional HR allows you time to focus on those core strategies and let the HR professional do the HR side of things. You're able to navigate uncertainty and changes because CEOs face constant, you all face constant uncertainty and economic fluctuations, as I know everyone can attest to that. You have the flexibility to adapt to those changes when you're putting your HR functionality in that of a fractional HR professional. Cost effective always goes back to that bottom line. If you're CFO, you always want to hear the dollars that are in that because you are able to access senior level HR expertise at a fraction of the cost. Back to my project, if I had had somebody that was in-house, you were having to pay a full-time salary to do this, and mine was just a fraction of what it would have cost for an HR professional to do this. And I had the expertise, and I didn't have to focus on payroll, and I didn't have to focus on benefits, which was great. Uh, Agility and scalability, I think this is critical to understand. It helps you be agile and it helps you scale to what you want to scale to. Again, I can't stress the access to specialized skills enough, nor can I stress the risk management and compliance because there are a lot of laws out there that a lot of small business owners or a lot of businesses don't even know about or aren't paying attention to or don't think they pertain to them. And of course, enhancing the employee experience is always nice to have a third party come in and say, here's the situation, here's what your employees are saying. How can I help you make it better? So you want to make sure you're proofing your business by preparing for growth and expansion. So as you're thinking through next steps, do I take on a fractional HR person? How can I plan for future growth with confidence, knowing that you have all the access to the expertise needed to grow that business? It helps you stay competitive in the talent market. I think that's also really kind of important to understand. I know unemployment ticked up recently. It went from 4.1 to I think it was a 4.3 or 4.5. So it ticked up slightly. It's starting to become more of an employer's market. But what happens when it becomes an employee's market again? How are you retaining those employees that you got on board during a tight labor market? And believe it or not, there are still millions of jobs out there that have not been filled. And it is a struggle for CEOs to get positions filled. You're able to adapt to those technological advancements because now you can focus on the stuff that pertains to your business and you can I can't even say that. You can leverage that innovation by streamlining those HR processes. Obviously, maximizing your ROI. So ROI is big, return on investment. How are you doing that for your fractional HR? You're able to track that a lot easier than sometimes it is to track it with your in-house HR. You're building those resilient organizations because your fractional HR actually helps provide strategic support. We understand what it takes for you to get out there and really build a world-class organization for you and your employees. And you want to make sure that you're acting now for future success. You don't want to look back a year from now and be like, I sat on this cool little thing with this girl and she talked about fractional HR and now I have all these issues and I wish I'd done it sooner. So now is the time to act. So how do you choose that right fractional person? I actually have a link that I can share with Helen that is a form. It's a Google form for you to utilize that helps you kind of narrow down if this is something that would work for you. First, you want to make sure that you understand your business needs. So what's the business need for this? You want to make sure that you're evaluating the expertise and track record of potential partners. So who are you looking at utilizing? Maybe it's a large organization. Maybe it's a single solopreneur like me. What is their track record? The importance of cultural alignment. You want to bring somebody that understands or wants to understand your culture. It is not a one size fits all. We all have different specialties and we all have different approaches. So really understanding that alignment, because if you bring somebody in that doesn't align with your culture, doesn't align with your objectives, then you're just going to be spinning your wheels and wasting money. How are they going to communicate with you? And then how are they going to track success and demonstrate that critical ROI? So once you've done that, the steps to integrate fractional HR into your business is to create an implementation strategy. And you do that by working with your fractional HR consultants. So you have them assess current SHRM capabilities and needs. So that's something that you can do with this person. You want to define clear objectives for your fractional HR support. What do you hope to achieve out of this? What is the objective of this? And build that partnership with clear expectations and key performance indicators. If they don't know what they're striving for, then again, it's going to be a non-win situation. And always regularly review and adjust the approach as the business grows. You don't know what you don't know. And if you're not keeping an eye on out of it, then you could get off track. So making sure that you're regularly communicating with your fractional HR consultant as a business owner or as a CEO. So how do you measure it? So here's some great ways to measure it. You can measure it with employee satisfaction and engagement levels. So let's say you're bringing me in to do an employee engagement survey and you want to have me talk to your employees, create focus groups, spend some time really digging into why employees are satisfied or not satisfied and why they are still engaged with your organization. So how do you do that? So you hire me, you say, this is what my expectations are. This is how long the project is. These are the employees, go. So you start with your benchmark, you start with your bottom line, and then you move your all the way up to the top, and then you see if your engagement levels have changed. Maybe you want a reduction of HR related risks and compliance issues. First thing you probably want to consider is your employee handbook. That's one of the first things that a litigation attorney will ask for is your employee handbook. So maybe you need someone to come in and do a handbook review and see where your risks are during an HR audit. And then cost savings and operations efficiency. So maybe you brought somebody in to evaluate talent acquisition. So what's your cost to hire? How long is it taking to hire? How much a cost is associated with it? What are the training costs? And then you back into that once this is put into place and see how much your savings. So there's lots of ways. I wanted to give 3 key ways to determine your return on investment. So is fractional HR right for your business? Well, things to consider. It is a powerful tool for business growth. If you have not gotten that out of this message, then I hope this very last slide will really encourage you to understand that it is a great tool for you to implement and utilize. You get that full-time impact with part-time resources. And just because it's part-time does not mean it is any less of a great impact to implement. Your strategic HR partners or your fractional HR partners come with great levels of expertise and experience, and you get them at a fractional of a cost for only part of the time, which I think is great. And you're leveraging fractional HR for your business because you're taking the steps that you need to grow your business and help achieve your business objectives, which in the long run, as a business owner and a CEO, ultimately what you want to achieve. Well, Helen, that concludes my session today. Wanted to give a fun little shout out. My company is called Manage with Hart. I have a fun podcast called Dear HR Diary that you can download at Spotify, Apple Music, iHeart Radio. I have business owners on there. If anybody ever wants to be on my podcast, like Helen. It's a great opportunity to just talk about, and it's not all things HR. I've talked to business owners. I've talked to a couple organizational psychologists. I mean, it's kind of a lot of fun. So yeah, tune in. It's great. And then of course my website and how to get a hold of me.
Perfect. Yes. No, thanks, Dawn. Everyone needs to check out your podcast. It's very fun. Yeah, I wish I'd have known about fractional HR services when I was in the CEO role, because I would have used it. It would have just made a lot of sense, because the one line you said a little minute ago, you said you wish you'd done it sooner, and I think that is so often the thing that CEOs say. They're just like, I wish I dealt with that HR issue sooner. Because a lot of the time we're just hoping it goes away, it resolves itself.
Yes. The employee quits.
With us out having to deal with it, you're just like, oh, please no, let it just, and then when, if you've got that employee that's just not a good fit, or say diplomatically, and you should have done something about it, by the time you actually let them go, you're like, it would have been better for everyone, them included, if we'd done this 6 months ago. So yeah, I think that's true. I loved what you said a while ago about going in and working with companies when two companies merge and mesh or don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because that is so true. You know, I've known people who work at those companies that have either been, you know, taken over or merged in some way, and you know, all of a sudden everything changes. The
Yeah.
culture changes, the rules change, everything changes, and it's just like all of a sudden I'm working for another company, even though
Mm-hmm.
I never left. I'm now working for a whole nother company, and this may not have been one that I would have applied to work for.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's like how to get over the bumps of bringing those two companies and meshing them together could be huge, because you're really going to see a problem with retention at that point, because people are going to be like,
100%.
it's no longer for me. I'm jumping ship. You know, and
I have a funny story about that, Helen.
yeah.
I actually worked with two credit unions in Colorado, and larger credit union took over a smaller credit union, and they were having a huge engagement situation. And what I found out when I started working with this credit union was they had fired a head teller from the large credit union. They had fired her, and she had gone to work at the smaller credit union,
Oh
and she
no.
was the head teller at the smaller credit union. So when the larger credit union took over the smaller credit union, the head teller was creating all kinds of drama, and they told this small credit union that they would not let any of their employees go for the first 6 months of the acquisition. And I'm like, well, why would you do that? So it was creating this cancer, this issue that was really, really rubbing all the people that knew she got fired from the large credit union, and all the small credit union people were, so it created this gang up against each other thing. And this is something so tiny that you wouldn't have even thought would have created this huge cultural issue. And it's stuff that a lot of large organizations overlook. I hear this a lot. Nothing's going to change. Nothing. We're still going to be ABC company, even though, XYZ company is merging with us. And I'm just going to tell you that is a sack of crap. If someone tells you nothing's going to change, don't believe them. And I say that's terrible, because it will change, because the culture changes, the expectations change, the performance changes, the stress for money changes. It's completely different. It doesn't even matter if you're the large company taking over the small company or vice versa.
Right.
It will change because the culture changes. It's just inevitable.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, leadership would do serve itself a lot better by going, of course, things are going to change. This is how, you know, we anticipate it going. Here's our plan, because
Hmm.
hopefully they've got one.
Hmm.
You know, and it's like, this is where we're going with this. This is our vision. We want you on board for the journey, which is a lot better than, yeah, lying to people and saying nothing's changing. And you're like,
Yeah.
delusional, delusional.
I've been through so many of those. And I've worked with several companies that have brought me in to do change management, and they usually bring me in afterwards. And I'm like, I wish you would have brought me in before, so I
Right.
could have at least created a strategy. And I call it an employee change strategy, because it's like, you've got to merge. You got to merge your bank accounts. You got to merge your technology. You've got to merge, your whatever. And the last thing a lot of companies think about is how are they going to merge their employees, or if they don't think about it, it's an afterthought later. They're like, oh gosh, I wish I would have thought about that.
Well, and they don't plan how they're going to merge the teams. So if you've got, you know, say for example, 10 leaders at each company, and then you bring the companies together, well, you've now got 20 leaders. Do you need 20 leaders? I mean, what's going to happen here? And yeah, you need to kind of get ahead of that stuff. And it is often the last thing on the list, which is surprising.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, companies might spend a lot more time, you know, hashing out the contracts than they do about an operational plan moving forward.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um,
Absolutely.
after they've been through it once, they might think about it more the second time round, though. They're like, uh-oh.
Yeah, 100%.
I know. Because you know, really the dream for a CEO is to, it's my dream anyway, to come in and just be like, oh, I'm in my Zen spot today. There's going to be no HR issues today. Everyone's going to come to work. They're going to be happy to be here. Everyone's going to be super productive, and we're all just going to, you know, sing and be merry all day long, and it's going to be fantastic. But that doesn't always happen. And so I feel like for CEOs, a lot of the time, HR issues can really feel like your day just got totally derailed. You know, you're like, oh, I'm working on this big project, and then all of a sudden something comes up, and you're like, ugh.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and that happens more than you'd like it to. At least I hope it wasn't just me. So
No, I've worked with lots of CEOs or lots of CEOs that are like, I don't
so
want to deal with this people stuff. You
yes,
know, and thankfully there are a lot of CEOs that are people, but then there are
yes,
CEOs that are not people, and they're like, someone else needs to deal with this. Or the people are too close. The CEOs that are people are too close to those people, and they can't make an objective decision. And I've also seen that happen several, particularly family-owned businesses. That's
oh
where I
yes.
see a lot of that happen. It's like, I can't fire my brother, and I'm like, yeah, but he's harassing people, and you're about to have a major lawsuit on your hands. So how do you fire your brother? So it's like helping CEOs kind of navigate that. Yeah, I think if we all came to work and sang and be married, I wouldn't have a job, even though.
Hey, it's not going to happen. So you're going to be good for the next 100 years. But I do feel that this is where your expertise at your level as a fractional HR person really comes into play, because you can come in at that higher level. Because if you've got that HR department of one, that person really isn't going to be as educated and as experienced as you. So when something comes up, which it always does, and I've had it happen to me in that role, you're just like, I am so over my head. I don't even know what to do with this.
Yeah.
Um, so I feel that certainly with all that's data and those stats that you're providing, I would agree 100% that you're right, that it would be so much more cost effective to bring someone in like you to really help at a higher level. And I feel as well that you would just be able to work so much better and be more respected, I think, by CEO and upper management. um
Yeah.
because you can say to them, I get it, and I get it from your point of view, and here's what I found worked. Because that CEO and HR pairing, it often needs work. It
Hmm.
really does. uh,
Yeah.
because a lot of the time CEOs don't always respect what HR are doing, because usually when they're sitting there doing their big plans and big things, and HR suddenly appears in their office, it's not a good thing.
They're like, it's the oh poop.
You get that kind of Pavlov's dog's response. It's like HR, and you're like, oh no,
Yeah. Yeah. What does she
what just
want now? What
happened?
does he want now?
Right. So if we can
Yeah.
get more towards CEOs seeing HR as being like the go-to person to talk about talent acquisition and retention. Hey, I'm excited to talk to you. Let's talk about where we're going with this. I think that would
Hmm.
just be the biggest turnaround ever. Yeah.
Well, and I think a lot of times, and I hear this over and over again, and even on TikTok and stuff like that, it's like, well, HR isn't your friend. And I get so sick of hearing HR isn't your friend. I'm like, hey, show me a job description, any job. Show me a teller. Where in a teller's job description that it says the teller is your friend? Where in the CFO's job description does it say the CFO is your friend? So I don't understand this HR isn't your friend. So a lot of people already go in with this preconceived notion about HR. And sometimes when you bring in a fractional, a lot of time, 100% of the time, when you bring in a fractional HR person, there's not that preconceived notion. It's like, oh, they're bringing in a pro. And I'm not here to like bash an HR person, because I've been an HR person for, a
Right.
long, long time. And I know what it's like to have someone come in, but it's also nice to have someone that supports your viewpoint as an HR professional, right? So if you're a single HR person and your CEO is like, I want to bring in Don Hart to do some management training, I know your plate is full. I'm not here to like piss any HR people off. I'm here to come alongside you and support what you do as an HR professional, because I get it from that side of the desk. And you're right. I think a lot of times CEOs are like, okay, well, I'm finding more value because I'm actually paying a cost for an HR fractional person to come in. And that's where that ROI is easier to track than it is to do with a single HR person or an in-house person. And I want to make that perfectly clear, because a lot of times HR professionals or people that are in a single HR role get really nervous when they're bringing in a fractional HR. That's not the goal at all. It's I want to help support you. And sometimes it's nice to have an outside person say, hey, your HR person is totally, I just did a seminar last week on conflict resolution, and was talking to this group out of California. And I had done my pre-call with the HR director, and I said, what's the biggest issue? And she said, I feel like they don't listen to me. And I said, okay, why do you feel that way? And she gave me some examples. And so I was able to build that into my presentation so that it helped build her credibility. I'm like, she's a great tool and a great resource, and
Right.
utilize her. So it's also kind of a supportive feature as well.
It totally is, because if you're that HR person and you don't feel that you have all the answers or something, you may have the ability to call legal, and ask them about stuff. But the trouble with that is you'll get back an answer that's just like, yes, legally you can do this. And you're like, oh yeah, but that's not really a very rounded answer.
Mhm.
It's just,
Yeah.
it's like, how can you get a more nuanced answer? How can you deal with a situation in a better way rather than just, yes, it's you can legally do this or not. So um yeah, so I think definitely coming in more of a mentor and everything is absolutely perfect. Yay. Well, Dawn, I am so glad that you were with us today and provided all this fabulous information. I'm going to put your contact stuff under the video so people can reach out to you with any questions. And of course, you love LinkedIn, so they can find you on LinkedIn.
100%.
Yes, and reach out with questions, because um, if you depending on where they are in the world, you can point them in the right direction,
Yeah.
some tips and tricks, and hopefully we'll find some new clients for you, because this is perfect.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Would love to chat if anybody has questions, even just like how do I handle an employee? I'm more than happy to hit me up on LinkedIn. I have some great connections in the UK, and I know some of your audiences in the UK. So I have some great fractional HR people in the UK I can put you in touch with. And then of course I'm in the United States, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions. Maybe the exception to California, because that California law is a little but I have done California HR. So, hit me with your best shot kind of thing. But
yeah.
this has been a true joy, Helen. I have really enjoyed talking to you and your audience.
Yay, well, thank you, Dawn. Yeah, the idea of states having their own completely different things is just kind of mind-boggling, isn't it? Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, it is. But thank you so much for this. We really appreciate it. And I really appreciate you, Dawn. Thank you.
Thank you.